It all started with a bright orange envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. At first, I thought it was just another piece of junk mail, maybe a flyer for a local pizza joint or a coupon for a car wash. But when I opened it, I saw the glaring letterhead of the Homeowners Association, HOA. My heart sank. The notice read, "Violation of community aesthetic standards. Immediate removal required." I blinked, rereading the words to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. My car, a simple, well-maintained sedan, had been parked in my own driveway for years without issue. It wasn't an eyesore, it wasn't a rust bucket, and it certainly wasn't violating any rules. Or so I thought. The letter claimed that my vehicle didn't conform to the community's revised aesthetic standards. I scoffed. Aesthetic standards? What did that even mean? My car was a normal sedan, the kind you'd see in any suburban neighborhood. But apparently, it didn't fit the uniform, upscale look the HOA was striving for. I knew exactly who was behind this. Linda. Linda was the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, a woman who took it upon herself to enforce every rule, no matter how trivial. If there was a complaint to be made, Linda was the one making it. She was the kind of person who patrolled the neighborhood with a clipboard, looking for any excuse to flex her authority. I decided to confront her. I marched over to her house, the violation notice in hand, and rang the doorbell. When she opened the door, she gave me that smug, practiced smile that always preceded her ruining someone's day. I was expecting you," she said, arms crossed. I held up the notice. "What the hell is this? My car has been parked in my driveway for years without a problem." Linda sighed dramatically, as if she were the long-suffering protector of the neighborhood. "It has recently come to the HOA's attention that your vehicle does not meet our revised aesthetic standards." Aesthetic standards? I repeated, barely able to contain my disbelief. "What does that even mean? It's a regular sedan." "It's an eyesore," she said flatly, as if that explained everything. "The community is striving for a more uniform, upscale look. Cars left in driveways create clutter." I looked around. There were other cars parked in driveways, expensive SUVs, trucks, even a couple of sports cars. "So, I guess those are fine?" I asked, pointing to a neighbor's shiny black SUV. Linda gave a tight-lipped smile. "Those vehicles complement the neighborhood's image. Yours, unfortunately, does not." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You can't be serious." She didn't blink. "The fine is $25 per day until the vehicle is moved." Now, $25 a day wasn't going to bankrupt me, but it was the principle of the thing. This wasn't about rules. It was about Linda flexing her authority. And I had no intention of rolling over. I took my grievance to the HOA board, thinking I'd be able to talk some sense into them. But as I sat across from the panel of middle-aged bureaucrats, I quickly realized that Linda had them all wrapped around her finger. No matter what argument I made, they nodded along to her nonsense about aesthetic value and maintaining property values. "This isn't about my car," I finally said, exasperated. "This is about her making up rules as she goes." One of the board members gave a helpless shrug. "The community has spoken." Oh, the community had spoken. All right. And I had just decided how I was going to respond. Linda wanted to play games? Fine. She thought my car was an eyesore? I was about to show her what a real eyesore looked like. I called my old friend Mike. Mike wasn't just a friend. He was a professional monster truck driver. His truck, a beastly machine named the Crusher, was massive, over 10 feet tall, covered in neon flame decals, with wheels taller than most cars. This thing wasn't just a vehicle. It was a rolling declaration of war. "Hey, man," I said when Mike answered. "How would you feel about parking your monster truck in my driveway for a few days?" There was a pause, then an amused chuckle. "What did you do now?" "Not me. Linda's on a power trip. She thinks my car's an eyesore and hit me with a fine for parking in my own driveway. So, I figured if she thinks my car's an eyesore, let's give her something way bigger to complain about." Mike burst out laughing. "Dude, say no more." I'm so in. The next morning, as Linda made her usual rounds with her clipboard in hand, she probably thought I had caved. My sedan was nowhere to be seen. But then, in the distance, a deep, earth-rumbling growl cut through the quiet suburban streets. The monster truck rounded the corner, its monstrous wheels crushing the pavement with every slow, deliberate roll. It was absurdly oversized, looking almost comical as it dwarfed the normal-sized houses around it. The engine roared like a dragon, loud enough to rattle windows. I stood at the edge of my driveway, grinning as Mike pulled in and parked that beast right in the middle of it. Linda, who had been speaking with another neighbor, turned around. Her jaw dropped so hard I thought it might dislocate. The sheer horror on her face was priceless. She stormed over, her face red, practically shaking with rage. "What is this?" she demanded. I gestured at the truck, feigning innocence. "My new vehicle. You said my sedan was an eyesore, so I got something more fitting. This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "You cannot park that thing here." I folded my arms. "Why not? I checked the HOA rules. Nowhere does it say I can't park a monster truck in my driveway." "You're violating the spirit of the rules," she shrieked. "Oh, so now we're enforcing the spirit of the rules." I smirked. "Seems a bit subjective, don't you think?" A few neighbors had gathered by now, some barely suppressing their laughter, others outright recording the moment on their phones. Linda turned to one of the HOA board members who had wandered over, looking equally stunned. "Do something," she demanded. The man scratched his head. "Technically, he's not breaking any written rules." Linda looked like she was about to combust on the spot. "I'll take this to the board," she snapped. I smiled. "You do that." That night, I cracked open a cold drink and watched from my porch as people from around the neighborhood came to take pictures with the monster truck. Mike, loving the attention, even let a few kids climb into the cab while their parents laughed and took selfies. Linda, meanwhile, sat on her porch, fuming, arms crossed, watching the horror unfold. The next morning, I found another violation notice, this time saying my oversized vehicle was a hazard to the neighborhood. I responded with an email. "Dear HOA, I appreciate your concern, but I've checked the regulations, and there are no rules against parking an oversized vehicle in my own driveway. If you'd like to discuss amending the rules, I'd be happy to participate in a fair vote by the community. Sincerely, the guy with the monster truck." I attached a photo of me posing next to the truck, throwing up a thumbs up. By noon, Linda had called for an emergency HOA board meeting. I knew this was far from over. The emergency HOA meeting was set for the next evening, and by then, the entire neighborhood was talking about it. Word had spread quickly, thanks in part to the pictures and videos that had gone viral in our community's Facebook group. The comments were glorious. Finally, someone standing up to Linda. "That truck is a masterpiece. Leave it there forever. I just moved in, and I'm already loving this neighborhood." Not everyone was thrilled, of course. Linda had rallied a handful of her die-hard HOA loyalists, people who thought that anything fun or different was a personal attack on their property values. But judging by the overwhelming support, I wasn't too worried. Still, I knew Linda wasn't going down without a fight. I arrived at the HOA meeting early and took a seat near the front. Linda was already there, dressed in her usual power trip pantsuit, surrounded by a couple of board members who were clearly tired of dealing with her, but too spineless to say anything. She stood up the moment the meeting began. "I'd like to start by addressing the obnoxious violation taking place on Maplewood Drive," she said, not even mentioning my name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. "The presence of an oversized, disruptive vehicle has caused multiple complaints from residents. It is lowering property values and violating the spirit of our community guidelines." I raised my hand. "Can we define multiple complaints? Because from what I've seen, most people love the truck." Linda pursed her lips. "There have been numerous complaints." "How many, exactly?" I pressed. She faltered. "Well, I have received at least 6. I turned to the board. "There are over 100 homes in our HOA. You're telling me that 6 people being mildly annoyed is enough to start rewriting rules?" One of the board members, an older man named Richard, cleared his throat. "We do have processes in place for amending community guidelines, but they require a neighborhood vote." Linda's face twisted. This wasn't going the way she wanted. "Then let's put it to a vote," she snapped. A new rule banning oversized vehicles from driveways. The board reluctantly agreed to draft the amendment. Then Richard turned to me. "But since the rule hasn't been passed yet, your vehicle is not currently in violation of any HOA bylaws." I smiled. Glad we cleared that up. Linda's eye twitched. I knew she wasn't done. The next morning, I woke up to find a fresh stack of anonymous complaints in my mailbox, half of them obviously written in Linda's handwriting. A few hours later, I caught her pacing in front of my driveway, taking pictures from every angle like some kind of forensic investigator. She was desperate, and that meant she was about to try something underhanded. That evening, I got an email from the HOA claiming that my vehicle was a safety hazard because it obstructed the view of the street. I responded instantly. Dear HOA, I appreciate your concern. However, I have checked local traffic laws, and my vehicle is legally parked within my own property. It does not extend past my driveway or obstruct any sidewalks. If further clarification is needed, I'd be happy to involve law enforcement to confirm compliance. I hit send, knowing that Linda was now backed into a corner. She had tried playing by the rules. Now she was going to break them. And I was ready. That night, I had a feeling Linda was about to pull something shady. The way she had been pacing around, taking pictures, and muttering angrily to herself earlier in the day told me she wasn't about to let this go. So, before heading to bed, I set up a motion-activated security camera facing my driveway, just in case. At 3:17 a.m., I was jolted awake by the deep mechanical clanking of chains and the low rumble of a diesel engine. I shot up, grabbed my phone, and checked the live feed from my camera. Sure enough, there was a tow truck, its headlights off, rolling up to my driveway like a thief in the night. Two men in dark uniforms hopped out, one of them moving to attach chains to the crusher's front axle. I grabbed my keys, threw on a hoodie, and bolted outside. Hey, I shouted. What the hell do you think you're doing? The two men froze, clearly not expecting anyone to be awake. One of them, a greasy-looking guy with a thick beard, put on a fake smile. Sir, this vehicle is in violation of HOA regulations. We were called to remove it. I narrowed my eyes. At 3 a.m.? The second guy, younger and clearly nervous, spoke up. The order came from an HOA board member. A woman named, Linda. I grinned. Bingo. Well, gentlemen, I said, pulling out my phone. I'm afraid you've just made a very big mistake. I flipped my screen around to show them the recording from my security camera. See, this is private property, I continued, and you're trespassing. Not only that, but towing a vehicle without a lawful order is considered grand theft auto in this state. The younger guy's face went pale. Wait, what? His partner hissed, shut up. I took a calculated step forward. Now, you have two choices. You can unhook my truck, get back in yours, and pretend this never happened. Or I can call the police, hand over this footage, and let you explain to them why you're attempting an illegal repossession in the middle of the night. The two men exchanged a panicked glance. The younger one immediately started unhooking the chains. We're leaving, man. Let's go. Beard guy shot me a glare, but he knew he was caught. The tow truck sped off into the night, leaving me standing there, adrenaline pumping. I wasn't just going to let this go. I went back inside, downloaded the footage, and fired off an email to the HOA board, attaching the video of Linda's goons trying to steal my truck. I CC'd the local news station, the community Facebook group, and my lawyer. By 8 a.m., my inbox was flooded. Richard, the board member who had been neutral up until now, was furious. This is completely unacceptable. The HOA never authorized this, and if Linda acted alone, she will be held accountable. Linda, meanwhile, had sent a pitiful excuse of an email, claiming she acted in the best interest of the community and that my truck was a danger to children. I replied with exactly one sentence. See you in court, Linda. By noon, the HOA board held an emergency session, this time to deal with Linda. She tried to wiggle out of it, claiming she had misunderstood the rules and was only trying to restore peace to the neighborhood. But once the local news picked up the story, she was finished. The HOA had no choice but to remove her from her position as president. I wasn't done, though. I filed a lawsuit against her personally for attempted vehicle theft, harassment, and legal fees. The cherry on top? I parked a second monster truck in my driveway, just for fun. Linda had officially been removed from the HOA board, but that didn't mean she was done causing trouble. No, Linda was the kind of person who didn't know how to take a loss gracefully. After her failed midnight towing scam, the neighborhood was buzzing with the news. The local Facebook group was flooded with memes of Linda's meltdown, my monster truck, and screenshots of her pathetic excuses. She tried desperately to regain control. First, she sent out a mass email to the neighborhood, claiming she was wrongfully removed from her position and that the HOA had become lawless without her. Then, she tried going door to door, petitioning for reinstatement. But it backfired hilariously when half the neighborhood slammed their doors in her face. The best part? Some of my neighbors actually started parking bigger and crazier vehicles in their driveways, just to mock her. One guy parked his RV out front, decorated with flashing neon lights. Another neighbor got a bright pink food truck and started selling tacos on weekends. Linda was having an absolute meltdown. But her biggest mistake? Trying to get revenge on the HOA itself. She sued the HOA, claiming they had unfairly discriminated against her and that she had been ousted in a conspiracy to turn the neighborhood into a lawless junkyard. The case was laughed out of court within minutes. Then came the final blow. One day, I got an email from the new HOA president, someone reasonable, for a change. "Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up. Linda has officially sold her house. She's moving out." I couldn't believe it. After years of terrorizing the neighborhood, after destroying friendships, handing out bogus fines, and trying to steal my damn truck, Linda was finally gone. The neighborhood threw an impromptu block party to celebrate. I parked the crusher right in the middle of the street for everyone to take pictures with. Someone even brought a cardboard cutout of Linda's scowling face, and people took turns posing with it, pretending to hand her fake fines. As the night went on, as we laughed, ate, and shared HOA horror stories, I realized something. I hadn't just won against Linda. I had changed the neighborhood for the better. With Linda finally gone for good, life in the neighborhood felt completely different. No more random fines, no more ridiculous HOA citations for aesthetic violations, and no more clipboard-wielding dictator patrolling the streets like a wannabe sheriff. For the first time in years, people actually felt comfortable in their own homes. And honestly, I wasn't going to lie. It felt amazing knowing I was the one who had finally put an end to her reign of terror. The HOA, now under new leadership, had made some major changes. First, they eliminated Linda's ridiculous rules, including the absurd aesthetic vehicle guidelines. That meant people could actually park in their own driveways without worrying about whether or not their car matched the neighborhood. Second, they issued refunds to several people who had been fined unfairly by Linda in the past. Turns out, she had been pocketing some of the fine money herself, a discovery that only cemented her downfall. And finally, they reached out to me personally to say that they had actually enjoyed my creative way of handling the situation. Not going to lie, the new HOA president told me over the phone that monster truck was legendary. I couldn't help but laugh. So, I take it I won't be getting any more fines for parking it in my driveway. He chuckled. "Nah, man. Keep that thing as long as you want." With the HOA finally on my side, life returned to normal. Or, well, as normal as it could get when you own a monster truck. One afternoon, a few weeks later, I was sitting on my porch when my neighbor, Steve, walked up, shaking his head and laughing. "You know," he said, "this whole thing started because Linda thought your car was an eyesore. And now, thanks to her, half the neighborhood is obsessed with monster trucks." I looked around and realized he was right. 2 houses down, a guy had bought his own oversized truck, complete with flame decals. Another neighbor had painted his van bright neon green, just for fun. It was like a giant middle finger to Linda's ridiculous rules. "Well," I said, grinning, "guess she really left her mark on the neighborhood." Steve laughed. "So, what are you going to do now?" "Keep the crusher." I thought about it for a second. Did I still need it? Maybe not. But at the same time, I glanced at the truck sitting proudly in my driveway, a symbol of everything I had fought for. "Yeah," I said, "I'm keeping it." With Linda gone, the HOA fixed, and the neighborhood thriving, my job here was done. But just in case another power-tripping Linda ever tried to pull something, the crusher would be waiting.